George Bremer, kind enough to join us now, cover the Colts as a beat reporter. And George, let's start with Carson Wentz. What is the latest from your vantage point about his health?
Yeah, the Colts are optimistic. They've been saying that all along, that they're optimistic he'll be closer to the 5-week range than the 12-week range in that massive kind of period that he could be out. But we're not sure yet. I think there's still the big checkpoint is coming Monday. That'll be 2 weeks after the surgery, and I think that's where they feel like you'll have a better idea. You can start to firm up a real return date in there. But he's been out at practice the last 3 or 4 days. Taking mental reps. He's almost surgically connected to Frank Reich's hip right now, just right next to him after every snap. You can see the hand gestures. They're still very involved in the offense. I think the plan is to get him back into walkthroughs pretty quickly, and then they'll kind of see where they can go from there. But I thought it was interesting yesterday, Jim Irsay, who's always probably the most optimistic guy in this building, said, they still feel good and he's on track, but they want to make sure he's 100%. They don't want to give up, anything. If they have to miss a game or two to make sure that he's healthy the rest of the season, they'll make that sacrifice. I think it's still too early right now to know that for sure.
Do you read between the tea leaves, George, and take anything away from his involvement being so close to Frank Reich, like you mentioned, about him potentially being ready through the first couple of games?
Yeah, it looks like right now everything they've done, every action they've taken and not taken, not bringing in a veteran quarterback, those sorts of things all point towards that. I think that the organization's belief still is that he'll more likely that he's ready than not. And I definitely think when you see him, in practice, being as involved as he is, being as engaged as he is with the head coach, to me, it looks like a sign that they're trying to get him as ready as they can during this time where he physically can't do anything.
How would you assess their position in terms of backups? What have you seen so far from practices, and who's the next man up, so to speak?
Yeah, it's still Jacob Eason at this point. There's a competition, obviously, between him and Sam Ehlinger. For all intents and purposes, they're both rookies. Eason so little work last year. They had Phillip Rivers here and Jacoby Brissett. Obviously, there was no offseason. Everybody understands how last season went in that regard. He got about 4 snaps during the training camp practice that we saw a day in team drills, May. And he had about 11 snaps combined. They had 2 practices at the stadium where they had some scrimmages. That coming into this season, that was the entirety of his NFL experience. He threw before games with then quarterbacks coach Marcus Brady, and they tried to get him as ready as he could. But he's as close to a rookie as you can be without having been drafted this season. And then Ehlinger, I think he's lived up to everything that people thought about him coming out of Texas. He's picked up this offense very quickly. He has just that, whatever that intangible quality is, leadership, it's there with him. And I think that's helped him kind of take command of the huddle faster than they would expect. But by the same time, you've got everything physically is in Jacob Eason's favor. He's got the stronger arm, he's got the size, and then it feels like all the other aspects that go into quarterback are in Sam Ehlinger's favor. So it's a very tight competition right now. And right now, both of them don't look like they're ready to start week 1. But how many rookies are? I think they're where you would expect them to be at this point in their careers.
Based on what you've seen, who would you give the edge to?
I personally would give Ehlinger just a slight edge, because I think when they move the ball in practice, when they have those periods where they're going first, second, third down, or there's a 2-minute drill or something like that, he consistently moves the football. With Eason, it's been more fits and starts. They're big plays, but there's also mistakes. There's times where he holds the ball a little bit too long. It's not that Ehlinger doesn't make mistakes. He does, but they're more physical. It's less often a mental mistake from him. He seems to have a plan when he gets the line of scrimmage. He knows where he wants to go with the ball. Eason's getting there, but it just feels like Ehlinger's further ahead in that regard right now.
Where's the offensive line right now, George, in terms of being able to help facilitate a rookie quarterback situation if Carson isn't ready to go?
Yeah, that's been a big issue here, too. A lot of people are getting on Eason and saying he's holding the ball and he's not as decisive as he needs to be. He hasn't been playing behind the first-string offensive line the whole time. Ryan Kelly got hurt the first week of practice. He's still out. He's expected to be back maybe as early as next week. Had a hyperextended elbow, but your starting center's gone. Their backup center didn't practice yesterday. There wasn't a real injury report on him, but you're down to your third string center yesterday. Their left guard, obviously, Quentin Nelson, is not practicing. He's got the same injury as Carson Wentz, same timeline. They're hopeful he'll be back week one. Again, you got to wait and see. Left tackle Eric Fisher still recovering from Achilles. He's out. And then 2 days earlier this week, the right tackle Braden Smith was also out. So there were 2 practices where the only starting lineman was Mark Lewinsky. Actually, there was one where he was out too on a rest day. So they had one with the entire backup line. And I think that's definitely played a part in all of this, not just their ability to protect him right now and their ability to go into the season. But if it is Ehlinger, if it is Eason, they're not building that chemistry with the quarterback that you would get with all these snaps. They're doing it with the backup lineman now, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. They are hopeful. They are optimistic that they'll have 4 of the 5 starters. I think Eric Fisher's probably still a couple weeks into the season. But again, I think that's something that's not been talked about as much because of the quarterback situation that's really been a factor in this camp.
In your mind, with both of the quarterbacks being described as rookies or lacking experience, maybe a better way to put it, both of them potentially going to be having to take a big step if Carson Wentz isn't ready for the first couple games in the season. Are the injury issues on the offensive line actually more important than deciding which one of these 2 inexperienced guys is going to ultimately end up getting the start until they can get Wentz back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got to get that line firmed up. When Wentz first went down, one of the reasons for optimism was, well, you've got one of the best lines in the league. They're going to protect him. And then, of course, they're going to open holes for that running game. Jonathan Taylor looks like he's ready to take that next step, be a real superstar in this league. But he's got to have blocking to do that as well. And if the line is in trouble, and it's true of, I think, every offense, if the line's in trouble, it's going to be harder for everybody else to do their job. And if you are a player making your first NFL start, it's just going to put that much more pressure on your shoulder. Ideally, they'd be in a situation where whoever's under center, even Carson Wentz, you're going to lean on that running game. You're going to get good protection from the line. You don't have to make big plays, basically be a game manager and just let the game, flow come to you. If the line is in danger, if the line is banged up and you've got a lot of backups out there, now all of a sudden you've got to do more things. And I think that's another thing that maybe plays into Ehlinger's favor as you look at the overall picture, because he does have some mobility. He can scramble. He can make plays while he's on the run. And that might be very necessary, depending on how this line comes together. It might be essential in week 1.
Outside of the quarterback position and the offensive line, George, when you look at some of the skill positions, who has surprised you or impressed you as you've watched some of these practices getting closer to the regular season?
Yeah, the biggest surprise in camp has probably been Mike Strawn. He's a 7th-round rookie out of Charleston. There was a lot of thought. He's coming from a Division II school. He's going to be really raw. He's going to have to work on his routes. You see it from time to time. There was a miscommunication yesterday in 7-on-7 against the Panthers where Ehlinger threw a deep ball and Strawn cut off the route. And you could hear Mike Groh, the receivers coach, yelling at Strawn and saying, hey, you got to be on this. But he's so much further advanced than they thought he would be. And then his physical gives, he's 6'5", 225 pounds. He's such a big kid, but he grew up running track in the Bahamas. At one time, he thought he'd be a 400 runner in the Olympics. That was his goal. That size speed combination is rare anyway. And when you see him coming along more quickly than he has, he's made a one-handed catch at least once every practice. He's making 50-50 catches. Yesterday, there was a throw from Ehlinger that was early that he didn't expect, but the ball was where it needed to be, and he looked up and was able to react quickly and just catch it in that big paw. I think he's been so much further ahead than they had any reason to expect. He's been the biggest surprise on either side of the ball in camp. And then the other guy that it's not as big of a surprise, but they've seen Michael Pittman start to take those steps that they want to see from him. He's a guy they want to see take over, be the number 1 guy. Obviously, T.Y. Hilton's still here. T.Y. Hilton's a great mentor, but they want to see Pittman start taking moves in that direction. He's had a really, really strong catch. He's had more drops than you would want to see from him, and then you would expect to see. But his highlight plays have been extraordinary. I had one yesterday, a toe tap in the end zone for a touchdown that it looked like midseason form.
Mm. As you look at both sides of the ball, George, how good should Colts fans expect this team to be this season?
Yeah, so much depends on Wentz availability. It's going to be interesting to see how long he is out. I think one of the things that was really, anytime your starting quarterback goes down, it's disappointing. But I think one of the things that was really devastating in particular was he had his best practice. It was just the second day, but he had his best practice that day, was hitting some deep balls. It looked, Rick Venturi, who's a radio analyst here, a former coach, obviously longtime coach in the NFL, said he looked like 2017 Carson Wentz to him that day. Like he was mobile, he had command of the offense, and then he goes down. And now, best case scenario, you're gonna have 5 weeks off when you get back in there. It's hard to really judge from that standpoint. I think until he gets back, they won't have the full complement of what you expect to see in 2021. But this defense has looked really good, and I think if there's reason for optimism, they've been hard on the two rookie quarterbacks, obviously, but they were hard on the Panthers yesterday too. And that's what everybody wanted to see. How's it going to look when there's a different offense out here? The young pass rushers are coming along quickly. Quiddy Pay's dealing with an injury right now. It feels like everybody in this camp is. But he's come along really quickly. Ben Banigou's taking a big step up. And you've got Darius Leonard, Kenny Moore, DeForest Buckner. It's a pretty good base to build on. I think this defense can keep them in games early. And then once Wentz is back, the offense should be able to hold up its end of the bargain as well.
Do you get the sense that the Colts are dealing with more injury issues than the rest of the league? I mean, this is a storyline that we've been following for the last couple of seasons just because we've been seeing all kinds of things pile up. I mean, injuries are expected every year, but maybe more so than normal. You know, as you assess the division, assess the league as a whole, are they starting from behind more than most in terms of who they don't have?
Yeah, and I don't even think it's just the raw numbers. It's specifically who's out. You know, your starting quarterback, 3/5 of your starting offensive line. DeForest Buckner's been out for about a week. Julian Blackman, one of their top safeties, is out right now. You know, when you're looking at such key, important parts of your team, everybody deals with injuries. You know, we hear all the time it's no excuse, and then the Colts are kind of acting in that same way. But I can't see how it's not, especially in September, when you're trying to, you know, when a lot of people have been together and they've had all these reps and have gone through the preseason, they're still going to be in that process. I don't see how they can't be with guys coming back in probably every week. I think a slow start is expected at this point. Honestly, I don't know how you avoid it. Obviously, it's next man up mentality, and they're not going to take anything for granted. But these injuries have just been to such critical people that I don't know how it doesn't affect them.
I saw that you wrote a little bit about some of the housekeeping that was done from a front office standpoint for the organization. You know, you mentioned Frank Reich and kind of just lining guys up for long-term success. How important is that to the organization, you think, moving forward, giving them some kind of stability there in terms of who's making the decisions?
Yeah, bringing back, locking up Reich and GM Chris Ballard was huge. You know, they're here through 2026 now. And I think there was some question because you've had a different quarterback every year that Frank Reich's been here. This will be, whoever starts will be the fourth quarterback to start in his career. And that's not, you know, nobody wants to go through that in the NFL. And so I think they have that stability now. They believe it'll be Carson Wentz long-term. Now you get your head coach long-term, you get your GM long-term, and they have some real critical guys. I mean, you kind of touched on a little bit there. Buckner, right at the top of that list. Quentin Nelson will join that group next year. They just gave Darius Leonard a big extension. They just gave Braden Smith a big extension. They feel like that core is in place. And so now you can move forward with a long-term plan instead of going year to year the way they've had to the last couple of years, where it just feels like it's a complete restart, new quarterback, a new everything. Now you've got some continuity, and more importantly, Reich and Ballard there's power behind their words. You don't have to question, you know, do I listen to him? Is he even going to be here next year? You know, the owners behind them 100%. You know, the core players are here. They really feel like they're ready to take off, that there's good things ahead. We'll see. The injuries have slowed that process once again. But I think they feel like that was the last piece of this. You've got the core in place. Now you got leadership in place. And now it's just a matter of continuing to build on the foundation they've laid.
From everything you're saying about leadership, the sense that you get from being close to the team is that they're still behind Carson Wentz and feels like he's their quarterback, despite the fact that we haven't been able to really see him put together injury-free seasons except for a handful of times.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously he's got to go out on the field and do it. And the fact that he's not here right now is not great, but that was a really weird situation. Apparently goes back to his high school days. He may have had a broken foot then, and the bone fragment just decided to come dislodged here for whatever reason. But I think obviously everybody's got to go out and prove it, but they do have a lot of faith. He did everything right this offseason. He spent a lot of time connecting with his teammates. It's one of the things he was criticized for in Philadelphia. When the players talk about him, you can tell that even in this short time, they believe in him. They see him as a leader of this team. And like I said, the little bit of time he's been on the field, he's looked like the player they want him to be. Now the question is, how's it going to play out? And ultimately, that's what it is for everybody. He's got the backing of the owner. He's got the backing of the general manager. He's got the backing of the head coach. But he's got to get out there and he's got to do it. Whether that's week 1, week 3, we'll wait and see. He's still the most critical piece of this organization. And I think that's just nature of the NFL right now. He's the quarterback. He's their guy. And whatever happens this year and in the years to come, it's going to be on Carson Wentz's shoulder. They feel good about it. But yeah, he's got a lot to prove, and he knows that.
George Bremer, thank you so much for spending the time with us. You were generous. We appreciate it. We'll let you go, but thanks so much for the fascinating insight.